Israel's ambassador to the United States is voicing hope that the U.S. embassy will soon be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is something that Donald Trump has promised repeatedly. Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer told guests at his annual Hanukkah reception that such a move would be, quote, a great step forward toward peace. It certainly would be a great break from the policy of many past administrations. CNN's Oren Lieberman joins us now from Jerusalem, and to hear the ambassador say this while he was in the U.S., Oren, was very, very interesting.
A big statement. Dermer is considered one of Netanyahu's closest confidants, and this would be the highest endorsement of Trump's plan to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem from Netanyahu's inner circle. Here's exactly what Ron Dermer said. He said at the annual Hanukkah party put on by the Israeli embassy in the U.S., I hope that next year the U.S. ambassador to Israel lights the menorah in his embassy in Jerusalem where the Maccabees lit it 2,200 years ago. So again, a very high-level endorsement from Netanyahu's inner circle. Prime Minister Netanyahu, however, has been much more careful with how he words his excitement about President-elect Trump. He has certainly been optimistic. He's called it great. He said there'd be an opportunity for some new ideas about how to handle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and how to handle the U.S.-Israel relationship, which is strained now with current President Barack Obama. So this goes back to 1995, where there's a law on the books in the U.S. that says that the embassy should move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but every 6 months since that law was passed, that option has been waived for national security reasons by now 3 different presidents. Trump has said repeatedly that he would move the embassy. Meanwhile, Palestinians furious about the idea, the possibility of Trump moving the embassy, saying it would violate international law and that they would consider revoking the recognition of the State of Israel. So PLO's Secretary General saying they would also cancel agreements between the Palestinians and Israel. So a very harsh reaction to the possibility of moving the embassy coming from the Palestinians. John?
Yeah, it'd be controversial, but it was a campaign promise for the president-elect, so we will see very quickly if he follows through with that. Oren Lieberman, thanks so much. All right, this morning, with violence flaring across the globe and new fears of terror attacks and new questions about whether he received the classified daily briefing on these attacks. We do understand President-elect is getting one today. What is the President-elect doing, though, this morning? He's trash-talking Hillary Clinton's campaign. Donald Trump wrote this morning, campaigning to win the Electoral College is much more difficult and sophisticated than the popular vote. Hillary Clinton focused on the wrong states! Exclamation point. Now, Hillary Clinton won nearly 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean very much. She lost in the Electoral College, and for some Democrats, that is reason enough to question the Electoral College system. Fox News host Bill O'Reilly, though, thinks they have another motivation.
The left in America is demanding that the Electoral College system, put into place in 1787, be scrapped. But there's a hidden reason for this. Talking Points believes this is all about race. The left sees white privilege in America as an oppressive force that must be done away with. Therefore, white working-class voters must be marginalized. Summing up, left wants power taken away from the white establishment. They want a profound change in the way America is run. Taking voting power away from the white precincts is the quickest way to do that.
With me now, CNN political commentator and Spectrum News political anchor Errol Lewis, former U.S. Navy SEAL and a Donald Trump supporter Carl Higbee, and Democratic strategist Daniel McLaughlin. Errol, there are really 2 issues here. There's what Bill O'Reilly said, so we can do some media analysis here, and then there's also what President-elect Trump is saying about the Electoral College this morning, instead of focusing maybe on some other issues. Let's just take Bill O'Reilly quickly here. He says it's all about race. Are questions about the Electoral College system at this point all about race?
No, of course not. Although the Electoral College has its ignominious origins in the slavery system in which it was born. So that's just a historical fact. That's just the historical reality. That is part of the discussion about why people have said, well, maybe it's time to take another look at it. The more pressing issue, of course, is that we've never had to deal with this before, but we're increasingly seeing a growing gap between the popular vote and the Electoral College outcome. And if that continues, from 2 million to 3 million, when it becomes, 10 or 15 million, I think it'll be obvious to everybody that it needs a second look. Not necessarily outright abolition, but clearly there's an issue here that's going to have to get dealt with. What Bill O'Reilly is up to, who knows? I mean, that has been his brand, that kind of divisiveness, the sort of ugly talk about race. It'll probably work for his ratings. We're talking about him now on a rival channel. Maybe the worst thing you could do with the kind of platform that he's built, but that's Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, Carl, I wonder what your take on it is. And I should note that some people think it overrepresents rural voters, largely white, not necessarily white working class voters. But beside the point, what did you make of what Bill O'Reilly said?
I generally agree with Bill O'Reilly, but I don't really agree. I think he's oversimplifying it in the terms of race, and I think it is a talking point for both left and right to singular race in this thing. But let's look at the Electoral College and why it's there in the first place. It's so you can't campaign in the top 5 cities where they're populous and then win the entire country. I mean, Donald Trump won basically 96% geographically of America. So and typically minorities are harbored most in the inner cities. So the issue is he's making the point that white working class are trying to be marginalized by doing away with the Electoral College system, which would marginalize a large geographical area of the country. But I think he's oversimplifying it for that segment.
Just to be clear, Errol's right. Historically speaking, the Electoral College was founded really based on a couple of things. One was to make sure, in some cases, that slaveholding states did have as much representation as the northern states, which did not hold slaves. The other issue, which ironically now, was that Alexander Hamilton and others wanted this body to be a buffer.
But you used to have to own land, too, to vote.
Well, and then slaves, counted as 3/5. I mean, there's a lot of used-tos here that historically doesn't apply and should not apply anymore. Danielle, do you think at this point, you're a Democrat, do you think the Electoral College should go away?
Well, it's not functioning as it was designed to function. And one thing we can see with the most recent election is the Electoral College was meant to be a break on the sort of uneducated, unknowing populace, which is the way the founders intended it. Of course, what we have today with information technology, with the internet, we are more informed. We have a robust media. And so the idea that there are these electors on high that are going to make determinations about a president that regular folks can't make, I think doesn't make any sense anymore. So that's, I think, another reason to think about getting rid of it. Whether we can or not, and whether this becomes yet another partisan issue, which I suspect that it will, is another question altogether.
But Errol might have right. It might just be a ratings issue that he's going on right now. Let's talk about what the president-elect was doing this morning, because I was surprised to see him bring this up. I don't think he was bringing it up because Bill O'Reilly brought it up last night. I'm not sure why President-elect Trump decided to Monday morning quarterback an election he won. Right? I mean, you don't often look back, and argue over the finer points of an election which you won. The only thing I could think of, Errol, was maybe he wanted people talking about that rather than some of these stories that have come out over the last 24 hours about his sons maybe trying to, grant access or sell access to a charity, for a fundraising.
Well, that's exactly right. When the conflict of interest questions get a little bit too hot, all of a sudden, what he'll do is take his Twitter and reprogram the reporting of news channels, including this one, frankly, and have us talk about something else. So there's that. There's also this, nagging question about whether or not he bothered to get any briefings, national security briefings, as the world is literally going up in flames, depending on the corner of the globe that you're looking at. So yes, it's a tool of distraction. It seems to work pretty reliably for him, and he'll do it as long as it works.
So let's not be distracted. Let's talk facts around the world that concerns us all. They wouldn't tell us whether he was receiving the briefing from the intelligence service. They did say he was talking to his national security team. Today we do learn that he is getting the classified daily briefing. Is that a good move in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. And the issue is, he's getting them today, but he doesn't get them every day. Look, I've sat through these briefings while I was in the military.
But can I just interrupt you quickly? The issue in this particular case isn't every day. It was, why not get one yesterday? Why not get one in the wake of these attacks, which are so alarming, and there is new information which one would think would need to be learned?
Right, but you keep in mind that members of his staff did attend briefings yesterday and attend them every day, like General Mike Flynn, and they inform him based on certain things that he may need to know. Now, going back to what I was saying, I've sat in these briefings every single day when I was in Iraq and places like that, and oftentimes for 3 weeks you'd have the exact same intel brief from the exact same PowerPoints. So there's no need. If there's new information, I'm sure General Flynn is going to come up and say, hey, Mr. Trump, you got to attend to this, and he will immediately attend to it. But for him to sit there every day in monotony,
again, and Danielle, I'll let you jump in here, it's not the everyday. In this case, that's an issue here. It's the now. It's the in the wake of these attacks, and it's the idea of not having a buffer. As qualified as Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, retired general, might be, why play a game of telephone? Why not get the intelligence directly from the source?
I agree. I think there's 3 things going on here. One is optics. We have, and it's sort of related to number 2, Donald Trump is the least qualified candidate and now, president-elect that we've had in the history of this country. He has not been in politics.
That's your Democrat.
I would say, and I will clarify, in terms of we've either had general generals who have served in the military, or we've had folks who've been in politics. So I'm not saying he's not qualified within business and other things. So I want to make that very clear. Well, I actually just said that it did. But anyway, as it relates to foreign policy, he doesn't have really any experience. So I think from an optics perspective and from
foreign policy?
And a substantive perspective, I think it's really important. The second thing is that from a constitutional perspective, there are fewer more important things that a president does than being the commander-in-chief. And so I think, Carl, your point is well taken. If it is repetitive, I can understand that. But I think folks in America might want to see, because that power is so important and because we have so much going on, we have an ongoing Israeli-Palestine conflict. We have what's going on in Berlin. We have Ankara. We have, press suppression in Ankara. There's so much going on. This world is really, I don't want to say falling apart. There's a lot going on. And we want to see that he's taking it seriously and he's doing his job.
Yeah, the optics matter here, and it's different, right? We're not pre-election. Optics matter in the image you portray to the country as the image of a leader.
That's right. I mean, look, in South Korea, you have an absolute level of upheaval that we barely even report on. We've got, people marching in the streets probably as we speak right now. You've got things that are going on in the Middle East. You've got things that are going on all over the world. And we know from bitter history that it was at a briefing that a prior president was told that there's this thing called Al-Qaeda out there that's planning to strike the United States. It didn't stand out enough. It wasn't handled properly. We know that other presidents, like President Obama, take the same 10 minutes that they got maybe the day before and then have an hour-long conversation about what it means and how to tweak the policy. If Donald Trump doesn't want to do any of that, that's fine. That's his prerogative. However, we have the right to ask, maybe it would be better to do what your predecessors have done. And if you're not going to do it, please explain why.
Carl, last word.
Yeah, well, the other thing, too, is I want to point out that Obama, in his first term, only attended less than half of the intel briefings, probably because he saw the same reasons, the repetitiveness. But also, we have somebody, you're calling Donald Trump not qualified or the least qualified. President Obama served, half a Senate term and had no foreign policy experience. So I would argue that Donald Trump is exponentially more qualified than that.
I will say the one thing that qualified both of them is that they both won a presidential election.
Absolutely.
And you're qualified when the American people pick you to be president. Right. You will be the president, so you should learn how to do it. Guys, thanks so much for being with us. I appreciate it. Have a great holiday. If I don't see you again. Just in, we are getting word that Russia is now saying all dialogue with the U.S. is, quote, frozen. What does that mean? That sounds like a major development. We're going to get details live from Moscow coming up next.